All right, good morning. So Rachel, welcome, and you're on mute and that is fine. I am gonna, and if you're in a spot to either unmute and post what specific questions you have today, that would be great. Hey Jade. So what we want to do today, and we're gonna go ahead and get started. I believe in starting on time so that we can make sure that we end on time. And I'm going to ask a few questions to start off to find out, if there's things that specifically you're looking to get from today. If I don't hear back from you, I know you might be in a spot, yet this is recorded, so we'll be able to share it out with you at the end. And for some of these, the people that are registered that maybe weren't able to attend. So today we all typically have this question around, how do I decide what I'm supposed to do? Am I staying in my 20%? And that's where we utilize the 411. So for anybody that's listening and they're not completely on board or sure what a 411, it stands for 4 weeks, 1 month, and 1 year. Now, if we go back even further than that, we go, okay, how do we decide what's supposed to be on our 1 month and our 1 year and our 1 month? Well, we can go all the way back to something that we call a GPS, which is goals, priorities, and strategies. Now, you may also hear this referred to as the 1-3-5. Those are interchangeable and they're the same thing. So it's goals, priorities, strategies, or GPS. Now, if you want to go even further back, and this is going to be highly recommended, Gary Keller talks about this in the One Thing. Do you know what your someday goal is? So you actually want to go ahead and start with your someday goal. So if your intent is to be purposeful today, it's how do we align this with our someday goal? Because no matter how amazing right now is, are we on the right path? Right, to where we want, where our intent to be is on someday. So when we look at that and we're thinking about that someday goal, I'm going to share my screen. There's a couple of things that I'd like to share with you to make sure that you are aware that these are available to you. So if you go to the onething.com, and that's the number one, the onething.com, you can join this community, which is pretty amazing. And if you haven't joined the community, there's some free stuff that I want to point out to you so that you can go ahead and start utilizing this right now. Now, the one that I'm going to focus on today is actually, let me scroll down here. Okay, so I will email that out to everybody that's registered. And I'm sure they just changed it where it is on the website, and I'm just not seeing that. Well, goal setting retreat. Actually, it's the first thing. I just completely missed it. All right, so this is going to be the first piece that you want to do. This is going to help you create your someday goal. Once you have your someday goal, the intent is to back it up to, okay, then what's my 5-year goal? And there's actually a great book on this if you're looking for a book, and it's called The Five. It's a red book. You can get it off Amazon or any of the different places. What is your 5-year goal? Because it doesn't matter how successful I am right now if I'm not heading in the right direction, like my right direction, right? It's not about a right direction, it's your right direction. So we've got our 5-year, then we're going to take that to our GPS. Now I would imagine that everybody on this call at this point has done a GPS, right? You've been working with your coach, you've got your GPS for next year. So I'm going to ask that you actually pull your GPS out. The topic and what we're going to be looking at today is how do we go from we now know how to get to our someday goal, right? We can utilize the material from the one thing, figure out where our someday goal is. And you don't have to know like 100%. This is absolutely, it's just what would I like my life to look like when I'm 90? And sometimes it becomes, well, I know what I don't want to do. I don't want to be a door greeter at Walmart when I'm 90 because otherwise I can't pay my bills. Okay, that means that I must have to have a retirement fund. I've got to have investment property, whatever that is for you. That's going to help you discover what's your someday. Now you back it up to 5 years and then you go, okay, what can I do today that's going to put me on track for my 5-year? And that's where you come in with your GPS. Remember that GPS 135, same. So I am going to ask that you go ahead and pull your GPS out. Now, how do we have a relationship? And that's typically where we run into a challenge. We don't have a relationship with our 1-year goal to what do we have to do today? Okay. So what we're going to walk through today is how do we stay in relationship with our 1-year goal? Okay. So now we have our GPS. I'm going to pull one up in a little bit so that you're able to see that. I'm an example of a GPS. And we're going to utilize that one to create our 411. Now, there's also a video in here, if you go to the webinars and free stuff that Jeff Woods does, that's really amazing and powerful around the 411. Again, this is in the free stuff on the one thing. If you scroll down, you actually have the option to download the 411 Word document or the 411 Excel document. So we're going to go ahead and start working on this 411. So if you don't have a 411 in front of you, feel free to do what I'm doing right now so that you can download this. And right now I have everybody muted. I would love it if you would go ahead. I just want to make sure I've got everybody with me. Will you go ahead and make a note in the contact box so that I know that you could hear me and that you can see my screen, the one thing. Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. All right. Just wanted to make certain. All right. So now what we're going to look at is, where did that go? Oh, here we go. Now, there's lots of tools for the 411. You can, as far as what they look like, and they're all going to fairly be the same thing. And yet the power of this one is how Jeff explained it. And he runs the one thing for Gary and Jay Papazan. And this has become my personal favorite one, mainly because when we're creating this, a lot of times we go, okay, well, that kind of makes sense. And yet, what do I do with all those things that I'm supposed to do, right? And one of the things that we want to do is our intent is to take your GPS, right, your goals for the year for your business, and we're going to actively discover, okay, if this is where I'd like to be at the end of the year, where do I need to be this month? What do I need to do today? And we're going to look at lead and lag measures, okay? And a lead and a lag measure comes from the 4 disciplines of execution. So if you think about lead and lag, this is just an example. A lag measure is how much I weigh. The lead measure is what I ate and how I exercise up to this point, right? So every day I could say, I'm gonna weigh 150. Okay, what's my lead measures to get there? Another lag measure would be a closing. Okay, I'm gonna have 5 closings this month. Well, that happens when we're doing the lead measure. So really it's gonna start all the way back to our appointments, maybe even our contacts. That becomes the lead measure. So we're gonna look at how that incorporates in here. So if we, now again, remember I told you that we were gonna look at our GPS, and then that GPS is gonna go into our 411. So let's start there. Again, if you have your GPS, pull it up, and you can do this right alongside of me on the call today, because we're gonna go from, okay, my relationship, that's my GPS, this is my goal for the year. Then we're gonna say, okay, what do I need to do in January to make that happen? And then we're gonna go, okay, based on what my goal is in January, what do I have to do this week? And then we're gonna take it all the way to our calendar and say, okay, based on that, what do I need to do today? Because that's what sometimes the biggest challenge is. We get it on our GPS, we don't get it in our 411, or we go all the way to do it to our 411 and then we don't get it into our calendar. And there goes that bold law, right? If you erase, you must replace. Well, if it's not in our calendar, we can't erase it, we can't replace it. And this may be a Louisiana saying, and yet we run around feeling like a chicken with our head cut off. That just made me realize I never introduced myself. So I know some of you guys know me, others don't. Olivia Roberts, I'm a MAPS Mastery 101 coach, as well as a MAPS Bold coach. And the one thing is I'm very passionate about, mainly because it makes such a big difference in how productive I can be in less time, right? And that all what we'd like to do, right? More productive, more efficient, less time. And yet we have to start somewhere. Now, in the one thing, I'm gonna introduce you guys to something real quick. If you don't have this, the One Thing Planner, which by the way, you can now buy it on Amazon, which is pretty cool. So it talks about, so these are some questions, and you might choose to write these down. At the end of every month, you're going to want to reflect on these questions so that you can create your month, the next month's goal based on what happened the previous month, and so that we make sure that we have that relationship with our ultimate year goal. What's one thing you accomplished last month that made everything else easier or unnecessary? You guys are very familiar with that question, right? So what's one thing you accomplished last month that made everything else easier or unnecessary? Now, once you've answered that question, you're going to move to this next one. What's one thing you can do differently this month that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? What's one thing you can do differently this month that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? So, right, those questions are very similar, right? Like and yet it's the one thing you accomplished last month that made everything else easier or necessary. Number 2, what's the one thing you can do differently this month that will make everything else easier or unnecessary? And number 3, what priorities can you accomplish this month to feel like you're on track for your annual goal? So what priorities can you accomplish this month to feel like you're on track for your annual goals? When I email this recording out, I'll email these questions out as well. That way, in case you aren't able to write them down fast enough, what priorities can you accomplish this month to feel like you're on track for your annual goals? And then number 4, what 3 things are most likely to stop you from accomplishing your priorities? What 3 things are most likely to stop you from accomplishing your priorities? And then number 5, what's one solution for each? So you said, what's the 3 things that are most likely to stop me? Lay it out. All right. What's a solution for each? Now you are ready to go back into your GPS. Okay. So again, let me share an example of a GPS just so that you guys know what I'm working off of today. Okay. So this is an example of a GPS, right? So we've got our goal, 20 million, 69 units, 508,000 gross commission income. So Gary Keller breaks up our GPS in the, or he breaks up our entire business into leads, listings, and leverage. Well, we're going to break our entire business into priority 1, 2, sellers, buyers, and priority. And we're going to ask ourselves, okay, sellers. We've got our goal is to do 50% of our goal is sellers. So that means 10 million, 35 units, 254 gross commission income. That is what the seller side of the business owes the business, right? Priority number 2, buyers, it's 10 million, 34 units, 254 gross commission, because that's what the buyer side of the business owes, right? Then we're going to go, okay, well, where are we going to get that? And we're going to say, you know what? We know that for sellers, we want at least 2 areas of business. Our intent is to be database, right? Gary says build a moat, because we know we want it from our sphere of influence, past clients, right? Our database. And number 2, one specific seller based business. So that could be for sub owners, that could be the home light leads, that can be geographic farming, but specifically seller focused strategy, right? Then the buyers, where are we planning on getting our buyers? Now, one of the things between the buyers and sellers, your goal is to have 3 to 5 focuses for where your business is going to come from. More than 5 and it's going to get really diluted. So 3 to 5 sources of business. And we know database is going to be number 1. One of those is going to be specifically seller focused. And then where are the other 1 to 3 going to come from? And that gives us 5, right? And then priority number 3 is going to be leverage. So who do we have to become? What has to be put into place in order for priority 1 and 2 to take effect, right? So in this scenario, we've got to have a 36 touch program that gives us, because we're going to say past client sphere, that's 18, and referrals, and that's 20. So, 28. We're looking for 34, if I did my math right there, pieces of business from our database. Is our database large enough to give us that rate of return, right? Is it, and are we touching our folks enough? So that's where we've got this particular GPS, this particular client, that's what they need to focus on. Then we look at, okay, market plan. How do we make sure that we are selling our listings? How do we make sure that we are utilizing them to get more listings? Now, again, yours is not going to look exactly like this, and that's okay. I just wanted you to kind of have an idea of what we were going to work off of today when we're creating our GPS. So we've got our long-term goal. We know that this will put us toward our 5-year goal. Now we're going to take this and we're going to go, okay, how do I have a relationship with this throughout the year? So then we're going to pull out our 411. Now the 411 is not something that you're going to do one time and be done. A 411 you're going to do over and over and over every single week, and then put it into your calendar, okay? Now I'm going to pause right here before we start filling in this calendar so that we can then go to or filling in the 411. I'm going to pause here, and are there questions right now that anybody has? You can unmute yourself, or you can make a comment in the chat box. I'll have that up, okay? So feel free to make a comment in the chat box or unmute yourself and ask a question if you have a question as of right now. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and just continue to propel forward. Again, whenever I email this out, I'll have my information. So if you do have questions, feel free to give me a call. So now we're gonna look at this and we're gonna go, okay, so we've got our GPS. How do we create that relationship with what we have to do today? And this is that process of it. So now we go, okay, well, if my goal is 20 million, 69 units, and 508,000 gross commission income. Now this is the lag measure, right? Because this is everything else for our monthly and our weekly, those are our lead measures. This is where I want to end up at the end of the year. And so we go, okay, what needs to happen to do that? Well, you know what? I don't have a database system right now that's going to give me these results. So this was part of my leverage. So I'm going to say create and implement 36 touch, adding 350 people to my database. Okay, that would be a total of 500 in database. Right now we go, okay, so the other option that the other thing that we were looking at is let's say that our goal was to do a geographic farm. So create and implement action plan for geographic farm that leads to, that results in 5 closings. Whatever that number is for you, you guys get that, right? Professionally, our intent is to have 3 to 5. If we go larger than that, again, we dilute it and we tend to not do anything. Now, under personal, we're going to ask ourselves a couple things. This is talking about personal and personal financial, okay? So personal, maybe you have a goal to weigh 150 by March 8th and maintain for remainder of the year, okay? Then you maybe have save 10,000, you know, whatever it is for, actually, we're gonna do easy math, so save 12,000. And okay, and maybe you have a payoff 15,000 of debt. Okay, now these are of course not things like you want to make sure you take the time to really discover what this is going to be for you, right? Then, and we're just going to do a couple of these so you get the idea, right? Now we're going to go, okay, so one of the things we're here where my annual goal is, well, this is for 2020, right? And my monthly goal, what we're working on right now, we're going to go ahead and say that we're working on February's. So now I'm going to go, okay, if my goal is to do 20 million, 69 units, create and implement the 36 touch program, what is the one thing I can do? What is the most important thing that I can do in the month of February that's going to get me closer to these goals? And so in this instance, let's say that it is implement the DTD2 calls. That's for, if your DTD2 is just a method that we learn in Never Ending Referrals and in Bold on a calling system. So that we're calling 2 letters of the alphabet every week, so that every 13 weeks we're touching our people, right, 4 times. So implementing the DTD2, adding, and let's say, because my intent is to add 350 to my database, and yet I'd like to front load it. And so you can look at that, and I'm going to do some quick calculations with my calculator, and I would say, let's say it's 350 divided by 12. If I did 30 a month, that would get me to goal. And yet, if I don't add them until the end of the year, I'm not going to see the results here. So I'm going to decide that I want to do this in 6 months. So that means I need to add 59 per month. So add 10 to database. Okay. And create and implement the action plan for the geographic farming. Sign up for farming program. This is just an example of, right, how do these incorporate here? Now we look at personal, and I go, okay, if my goal is to weigh 150 by March, might be something to the effect of follow run program and follow paleo eating plan, right? Whatever that is for you that's going to get you to there, right? You could even be really specific and say run X amount of times, eat X amount of calories, right? Because we do want to make sure that it is quantifiable. And if it's not quantifiable, we want to be able to say, well, how would we know that that was done? So for instance, you know, we want to make sure that it's not vague, like feel great. Okay, well, how do I have a great relationship? Okay, how will I know that I have a great relationship, or when I have a great relationship? And then you go, okay, how do I quantify that? I'll feel like X. I'll have been on this many date nights, whatever that looks like. Now, if this certain, now and then you go and you ask yourself this question, and you go, okay, remember we looked at those questions from the One Thing Planner, and then, okay, so I've reflected, and in January, I'm working on February, and I said, what's the one thing I can do differently this month that's going to make everything else easier or unnecessary? You know what? Arrive at office, or maybe I'm doing like a 66-day challenge. Right? 8 a.m., whatever it is, you get, like, that doesn't matter for yours. It's what's that going to ask? What are the 3 things? And then what's the one thing you accomplished last month that made everything else easier and necessary? So you're going to go through and you look at the month of February. What do you need to do in February that's going to move your business forward so that you hit that 2020 goal? And so it could be the number of, you know, I've got to have, for me to hit 69 units closed, I've got to close 6, and yet I want to stay on, you know, that was the work that I did in January. So I want to make sure, so if I'm going to close, I need to, what am I moving that? I'm going to put 7 under contract, because that ensures that my March is covered, right? And the same thing, follow the run program, follow paleo eating plan, whatever that looks like, you're going to come and you're going to be very specific on the relationship. What do I have to do this month in order to have these results at the end of the year? Okay. Now, the reason why you're going to do this every month is because every month is going to be different. We don't have a month that it's the exact same. Some of them might be very similar, and yet we're not going to have one that's going to be exactly the same. Then we're going to come in and we're going to say, okay, so this week is, and in this example, we're going to say February 1.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
To February 7. And I'm about to show you a completed one. I just want to make sure that you're getting this. And again, feel free to type in if there's questions. I'm going to say my weekly goal, and I'm going to say, okay, well, if it was to be at the office at 7 a.m., that's, follow the 66-day challenge. So that would be, if it's to add 10 to the database, so am I front loading this? So add 5 to the database, call A&W this week from my DTD2. And then I look at, right, what do I specifically have to do this week that moves my business forward? Now then, remember, we all have tons of stuff that we feel like we need to do or we need to do, right? Like our big things, we know our big rocks is lead gen, lead follow-up, go on appointments, negotiate, contract, script, and role play. And yet there are so many other things, right, that you got to talk to this seller, you got to do this, you got to do that. So now all of those things that people tell you that you should do, that you think you should do, all of those tasks that you have, you're going to come and you're going to put them on this. Now, the cool part is you can print your 411 out, and it's definitely recommended. This is going to be your first page. And when you print this out, this automatically is on the back side of that page. So throughout the week, the month, you're writing down those things that you need to do, right? And yet this is the cool part. And you might have like 30 of these, right? And what we know is when we are on pace, when we're doing these activities, then we earn the right to move into our 80%. So this is how we determine, right? Are we staying focused? Are we doing our 20%? Then we earn the right to do our 80%. Sometimes you're going to notice that things stay on this 80% for a really long time until you might even go, that really wasn't even important. I can just take that off completely. Or you're going to have something on here that it was 80%, and now this is actually my 20%. So I'm going to put it up here for this week. So let me share an example of this completely done. Now this is my 411. Okay. So this is my 411, right, for the year. What do I need to do in January in order to make these things happen? And then what do I need to do this particular week? Okay. Now you'll notice that as I marked it off or as I did them, right, I can take that off, or I can, and if you'll even look up here, and this is the really fun part, is when you look at, okay, if my goal is to have, how many real estate agreements? Well, I had 2 by that date, so I just put 2, right? I've 300 contracts. Would I have so I'm missing my 3rd, right? My goal is to get 10 Zillow reviews, and the dentist appointments. Those have been done, so I got to mark those off, right? And so this gives you kind of an idea of what has to happen in January for me to know that I'm moving and I'm winning 2020, right? So then I go, okay, what do I specifically have to do this week? And these are the things that I specifically have to do this week. So I'm going to do the 100-day training with Jade. I'm going to add 50 METs to the command. I'm going to review my October bolds. I'm going to I've got to update my 2020 coaching playbook, request the reviews, listing presentation practice, because I'm teaching that tomorrow. And okay, so now that, right, is my personal. Now, anything else that I need to do, it would just come down here. So I had a, chiropractor appointment. I had a, you get the picture, right? You would just keep adding all of your to-dos. Only I'm not going to move to these to-dos until I earn the right to do so. That's such a very important word. I earn the right. Now, again, we're talking about the relationship with this. So having this, if you just stop here, we're still going to feel like we have way too many things to do. And how am I going to put them all? So these have to go into your calendar, right? So now this is an example of calendar. Okay. So now again, this is something that on Sundays, that's what Gary suggests, and I highly recommend that, is on Sundays that you're actually doing your full, you're asking yourself those questions that we talked about. You're reviewing your GPS, you're putting it into your 411, and then you're putting it into your calendar. So I updated and shared my 411 with my coach. I created the plan, and then this is what my Sunday looks like, right? Now, everything that was on that GPS has to go into my calendar. And so, well, I was in bold on Monday. I had some coaching clients, and I had that call and so this is some things that I'm figuring out, right? It's all there, and yet I want to make sure that everything on that GPS or on my 411 is in my calendar. So something that I'd said on my 411 was that to do the 100-day training with Jade. Well, then I've got to find time in my calendar to prep for that meeting, in addition to having that conversation with her. So that's where the 100-day training is implemented on my calendar, right? And then I've got to get prepared for that meeting, and then it's on my calendar, right? I have an appointment to talk to somebody about a listing appointment. So that appointment is in my calendar. Now, it was after I did my calendar, so I had to come back and erase and replace, which means my workout is not going to be until 6 o'clock tonight, right? So I erased and replaced, right? Again, this is where you have, I said I was going to practice the listing presentation, so that's in my calendar. I'm going to present the presentation. This is where I've got the schedule to do review for, request the reviews and reviewing my schedule and working out. So whatever, and yours is very possibly going to look completely different, and yet it's about that relationship. So did you create your 411 and put it into your calendar so that you know that all of those items fit into your calendar? And once those are in your calendar, then you're checking that whether you need to erase or replace. Now, at the end of the week, you would come back and you would go, you know what? Let's say my goal was to request 10 reviews. Let's say I only requested 7. Well, then I know I'm going to put that so that I know that that's going to stay on I've got to move that forward, right, to the next week. Let's say that I actually added 60 METs to my command, and then I go, okay, so next week I only need to add 40, and yet I know that I'm going to be out of town the following week. So you know what? I'm going to keep that up so that it would make it easier for me to hit my goal. Okay, so that's how we're going to have a relationship through all of these separate pieces. Now, the last piece that I want to share with you, and then we're going to wrap it up, is how do we make sure that our calendar, that we're set up to win? Now, I gave you kind of an example of my calendar, and yet I'm a MAPS coach and a bold coach. So again, it's going to look a little bit different than yours. And so what I'm going to share here is, as a real estate agent, what are some key tactics that you could utilize to win your day? So again, a lot of times we tend to not put everything in our calendar. We use it as an appointment book instead of this is what I'm going to do. So we want to tell our time where it's going to go instead of wondering where it went. It's much like money, right? So if we look at this and we're going to say, okay, the suggestion is to break your day into 90-minute segments. And why 90-minute segments? Think of it this way. If you go on a listing appointment, that listing appointment is going to be 45 minutes to an hour. Well, now I have drive time already built in and drive time built out. We forget to put that in our calendar. And we can do pretty much everything for 90 minutes, and then we need a break or we need to move around, that type of thing. So you might decide to do yours in 30-minute segments. There's no right or wrong here, and yet we find that 90-minute works. So let's say that your day starts at 8, and we're going to say 8 to 9:30, because we're going to break this into 90-minute segments. Okay. Now you might go, whoa, wait a minute. What are you breaking that? Well, at some point you got to sleep, right? One of the things, and if you go back to what Gary teaches, the one thing we always focus on, personal first. Plan, there's events. So you go with events first, because you can't control when there's a team meeting. You can't control that type of thing. And then you go, okay, we've got our events. Now we've got personal family time. Now we're going to plan our planning time and our one thing. So like on Sunday, do you have it in your calendar that you're going to spend time planning your next week? Because by Monday, it's too late, right? So between Friday and Sunday, you need to be planning that next week based on what happened. So now you're going to go, okay, so let's say that you personally know that at 2 to 3:30, you're going to pick up your kids. Maybe that's right. That's the way you've designed your life. And from 6:30 to 8, that's family time. Well, plug it in, right? Put it in your schedule so you don't inadvertently put something else there. Or if you decide to, then you can erase it and replace it, right? So now that's just an example. And then you go, okay, you know what? Or whatever that is, maybe, quit screen times, whatever that looks like for you, right? Now, so those are some examples. Now you come in here and you go, okay, so from 8 to 9:30. So one of the things that the course Lead Generation 3612-3 talks about and Bold talks about is something called PAM. So we talk about 3 hours of lead generation every day, and yet many people don't know what that means. You think 3 hours on the phone. Now, you're a newer agent, maybe that's what it needs to happen, because and yet PAM means prepare, action, maintain. Okay. So prepare means you're going to spend 15 minutes, script and role play, and 15 minutes on your, who am I going to call list, right? Getting ready for that call list. Then you're going to take action, and this is 2 hours. And let's say that the first hour is lead gen and the second hour is lead follow-up. We know the fortune is in the follow-up. And then maintain, that's going to be 30 minutes. Like, when you were on the phone with Johnny, he said, y'all talked about sending him something or schedule an appointment or whatever. Well, then you do that 30 minutes at the end. Remember, we talked about 90-minute block. So this is your 3-hour block, and we do PAM here. Now, you might even want to say specifically, if this was a Monday that you're planning out, on Monday, you're going to call open house leads, like whatever that looks like. Now, keep in mind, just like we talked about the 411, you have to do this every day. The intent isn't to have I'm giving you an example of a day. You want to make sure that you do a different day every week. Don't go, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the whole week, because it's not true, right? You're going to have an appointment at a different time on one day than another day. So this is just giving you an idea. So now I have prepared, I've taken the action, I've maintained. So I'm going to put here personal time. So you want to we talk about lunch, and a lot of realtors go, well, I don't really take a lunch. Well, you know what? We have personal time. So instead of thinking, right, like, so if you knew you had personal time, that's when you would run to the bank. That's when you would run and grab the t-shirt that you needed. That's when you would run and drop something off for your kid. That's when you would take the personal phone calls, right? So make sure you have a 90-minute segment in your day, because if you don't put it in there and you take it, then you run out of time, right? Now, we want to make sure there's time to do admin. Now, that's a 90-minute block. Now, you might say, well, I have an admin. Yep. Do you need to make sure, is there any paperwork that you need to fill out to be able to give to your admin? Is there a conversation that you need to have with your admin? That could be admin and negotiate contracts, right? Or follow up with somebody, whatever that looks like. You have to have a block in there, or again, you end up doing it all over the place and not realizing why you're working till 9 o'clock that night, right? This is also if you're, if you do have an admin and she knew this, then she knows that's when y'all are going to see, touch base, etc. every day, right? And in this scenario, we said, that you were going to pick up your kids. You've got that in your calendar, right? And then you go, you know what? I'm going to, and let's say for those of you that don't, now we're going to say appointment. Now, again, you're going to write this in pencil so you can erase and replace, right? And yet every day the suggestion would be you would ask yourself, okay, it's 2 o'clock. I don't have an appointment today. The next question, you would say, okay, or I don't have an appointment at this time. So the next question would be, did I get all the lead generation that I needed to do this morning? Did I get all the follow-up? And am I on track for the number of appointments that I need this week? If the answer is no, well, then you're going to lead generate. If the answer is yep, it's nope, I don't have an appointment right now, and yet I am on track for my appointments. I don't have a lead, I did what I need to do with lead gen this morning, and I am on track with my appointment. So now I get to work on, we all have those projects that we want to work on, right? We can't ever quite seem to get to, and we just got the list. Well, now this is where you get to work on that project. Now 3:30, treated like class, the bell rings, it's time to go to the next time block, and you go, okay, do I have an appointment? Yep, all right, well then I'm gonna go on my appointment. And then you get to ask yourself at 5 o'clock, and you go, okay, am I on track for my appointments? Yep. Did I do the lead gen that I needed? Yep. You know what? My project today is I'm gonna go home guilt-free and just be with my family or go watch a movie, whatever that means for you, right? Now, let's say you don't have an admin, you lead generate project, you might have to do something at night. That was where you would put there. And yet ultimately, as you grow this and you get everything situated, hopefully that would just be, family time, your time, whatever that looks like. So that's how you make sure that you have, and remember, again, if we go back to the 411 and I say, these are the things that need to go in, that's when I know. So did I lead generate? Did I get my METs in command? Did I have that in my schedule? The training with my buyer's agent, right? So one of my appointments that week, what might have been at 2 to, on Wednesday, 2 to 2:30, meet with buyer agent. Now I've got a 90-minute block for that. Does that make sense? Then, so again, that's how we make sure that we have the relationship, because whatever's here, and then you go, okay, that requesting reviews, well, I know that I'm going to be doing that during this time, right? Maybe, so if you're going to request 10 that week, request 2 reviews each day, right? Does that make sense? So that's how we have a relationship all the way from our someday goals to our 5-year goals to our 1-year goal to our how we utilize our 411 to keep that relationship, and how we go straight into putting that in our appointment book. Okay, so it's 11:50. I'd love to hear from anybody. Any questions? Any questions? Any ahas? Let's get a couple of those, and then we'll wrap up the call. So if you're in a spot, I'm going to unmute you. Now, I'll mute you back if it gets loud, just because I don't know where everybody is right now. But you are.
I did read those reviews that people were mad, but I haven't had an issue, so.
Yeah.
So I would love, so you're unmuted right now, so I would love for you to share, what is it that you heard? What is a takeaway from today's call? What questions do you have? Let's take a couple of those, and then we will wrap. Could be an aha, a question, anything.
Can you run through again the 80% tasks that you were writing in on the 411 worksheet?
Okay, yes. So, and those are just going to be those are going to be different for everybody, just because your 20 and 80% might be different from somebody else's. And yet, let me go back to there and make sure that, that this is what you're talking about. So when, are you talking about these items, right? The 80% items, or are you talking about the 20% items?
No, the 80% items, and yes, that's.
Yes. Okay, no, thank you. So basically your 80% is everything else that you need to do. So for instance, give me an example in your world, something that it wouldn't necessarily, it's not something that, it doesn't go in your, it's not going to go in this, this week of your 411, because you can only put 3 to 5 items. Like, these are big ticket items that if everything, the world caught on fire, as long as these items are done, your business is moving forward. And yet there's lots of things that we know we want to do or would be nice to do. What are some of those items on your task list?
Oh, okay. Work on our website.
Okay. So you might have a, let's say, so website. So that would be like one of the projects that you're in, that you want to do. What else?
Look at how many people have put reviews out on all the different websites, and kind of look at where we stand.
Okay. So that would all be in so you would just, again, so think about how often, like, we probably have them on sticky notes, depending on how, we either have them on sticky notes, or we have them in our planner. We have just all these things that we need to do, or I need to call the seller and tell them X, or I need to, all those things. You just, instead of having all these tasks everywhere, just put them on that 80%.
Okay.
And then, now this is where you might go, so like the reviews on your website, at some point that is going to be a 20%, because it's going to, depending on how you run your business, it's going to get you closer to your month and your year goal, right? You can share it with your client. So at some point you're going to go, okay, based on what happened last week and based on what I need to do this week, and then you're going to go through your 80% and you're going to go, you know what? This is the week that the website is part of my 20%. And it would just move from here to here. Now, the other thing, if you look at that, is sometimes when you're looking at your calendar, you're going to have space to do things on your week. So that's where, if you give, that example of, okay, I'm where I'm at supposed to be with everything on my, from this week, I've now earned the right to start working on these other items.
Okay, thank you. That helps me a lot. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. All right, if you don't, we're gonna go ahead, and I didn't see any other, let me check the comment box real quick, and then we're gonna.
I have one question.
Okay.
I'm jumping in late, like I said, but the PAM at the top of the last section you were going over on the calendar, what does that stand for again?
Prepare, action, maintain. So that's your 3 hours of lead generation, maintain. And then prepare 15 minutes of script and role play, 15 minutes of who you're going to call. An hour of lead gen, hour follow-up, or 2 hours lead generate, 2 hours follow-up, whatever makes sense in, that day for your business. And then maintain 30 minutes of going, based on what I did during lead generation, who do I need to tell? What letter do I send? What note card do I need to send? That type of thing.
Okay. Thank you. Absolutely.
All right, perfect. On that note, that's where we are going to end. Thank you so much for being on today. I trust that this brought you value. Feel free to reach out to me. Everybody that is registered, so Maggie, yes, I'm going to, as long as everything worked with the recording. I am going to send out a recording of this entire call to everybody that registered, and that'll have my information on it. So if you do have questions, feel free to reach out. So, all right. On that note, we're wrap. Have an amazing, amazing rest of the day and the week, and be bold.